And we are live.
All right, welcome back, folks. Scott and I are back with another great topic this week. This one's a really great one because we're talking about force-free dog training and what that means, what it's about. There's so many different ways to train your dog, and a lot of times, when we talk about the different training methods, ideally, you hear through word of mouth or through a friend or family member the methods they chose, whether it's force-free, which let me just talk about what force-free means first, and I'll dive into the
Yeah.
details of it. So force-free dog training is basically uses humane techniques to instill positive behaviors and routines, including using a clicker trainer. So for example, you're not using things to kind of startle and scare your dog or intimidate them or inflict pain. So when we talk about using force-free, it's like treats, praise, and things of sorts to kind of get your dog to where you want them to be in training. So it's not using like shock collars, e-collars, citronella things, sprays, and things like that to punish your dog. It's more a reward-based training method that you're going to use to get your dog on board for things. When you talk about forestry, it's backed by psychologists because and behaviorists and animal behaviorists because they understand that dogs learn and with different types of reinforcement. So essentially, that's what force-free is. And to backtrack or what I was talking about, there's different training methods and ways to train your dog. What we're talking about today is force-free. I'll touch on a little bit about the other methods and kind of how to navigate through that. And I know you did some training with Archie. When you started training with him, did you know about the different types of training methods and how did you choose which one to go with?
No, we didn't know anything. We just we went to the puppy place we
Yeah.
were recommended to. Luckily, she
Mhm.
was generally force-free, positive reinforcement type of stuff. It wasn't until later, and as we start to learn more, and as we look for like his next round of what we're going to do, and really when we got into
Exactly.
like doing agility and talking to that trainer and starting to really get a feel for where things are going. Like you don't, especially when you're new dog owners or new puppy owners, you
Yep.
kind of see what you see on TV or YouTube, and you don't really know the difference.
Exactly. Exactly. You know what you know. And so if you see, stuff on TV or you Google what works, like especially if you have those unwanted behaviors, it's not more about, okay, what training method do I use? Like, what can I use that's going to work for my dog? You know? And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
let's talk about the force-free methods of training. So you might hear me say positive and negative. So when I'm referring to, when I go through this, I'm talking about positive and negative. When I mean positive, it doesn't mean good or bad. It just means adding or removing something when it comes down to training. So when you talk about force-free training, force-free trainers like myself, we love using positive reinforcement, which just means adding a desired stimulus or reward. So is it, for example, if you're asking your dog to sit, you will reward them with a treat or a praise so that they want to do the behavior a little bit more. And humans are no different. We're probably using positive reinforcement every day when we go to work because we get paid for working, right? And so that's why we go because it's a positive reinforcement because we know we got to get paid at the end of the week, every 2 weeks, or whatever your payment schedule is. So we use it every day in real life. So we use so in dog training, positive reinforcement, we use a lot of praise, a lot of rewards, and a lot of treats to kind of get them to where you want them to be when it comes down to dog training. Um, Another method that we may use too is called negative punishment. So essentially what that means is taking away or denying a dog's expected reward. So for example, when you're coming in a house, and I tell my clients all the time, and your dog's jumping on you and they expect like a pet or a hug or whatever it may be, just stand still. That's taking away the reward that they would get until they do like sit and whatever, and then you can go ahead and greet them. So you can go about training that way using positive reinforcement, and ideally when you're working on basic obedience, because that's what all dogs learn. You start by asking them to sit, give them a treat, ask them to go down, give them a treat. And so the same thing when you're working with like a fearful dog, you want to use all positive things to build that association so they'll want to do it more. But at the same way, with work with punishment, turn your back for dogs that jump, or just, if they're nipping and biting, taking away their toy, so just removing whatever it is that's going to get them, to perform the right behavior. So with Archie, did you try any of those things?
Yeah, we were told. I
Oh,
think we did our vet told us to turn her back, especially when he's jumping and everything, and to also just sort of take away certain things or like cross our arms, and that sort of thing. I was trying to get in that sort of things. Yeah, that big role. So we're sort of doing that, especially with the rugby challenges and everything. We're trying to do those things just to curb the things that behavior.
Yep. And are you breaking up on your end? Are you echoing a little bit?
Maybe. I'm echoing.
Sorry, folks. Yeah, because you're echoing on my end. I don't know if you're echoing for the people, but just to let you know. So we'll just go on ahead. So Scott's echoing a little bit on my end, but if he's echoing for you, hopefully it'll straighten itself out. So let me ask you this. So when you was doing the turn in the back, did you know it's called negative punishment?
No.
Exactly. Exactly. So everything I'm talking about is dog trainers lingo, but I'm a firm believer in the more you understand how I teach and how the dogs learn, you can help maneuver them through the process. So that's what 4-Speed dog training is about. And just to touch on the other forms a little bit. So when you talk about positive punishment, that's actually adding some type of punishment to the dog. So that's like yanking the chain or even pulling on a leash. That's considered punishment for the dog. And ideally, we don't use that form of training. Not saying that is, the other trainers out there that use it. Like I tell, when people ask me like, oh, I hear about using a choke collar, choke chain or stuff like that. Is it right or wrong? What I tell folks is you have to do what works for your dog. Not saying it's wrong. There's pros and cons to each type of training method. You may hear that with positive reinforcement trainers, forestry, that we use too many treats. And, it's not that we use too many treats. You do what works for your dog. So, but keep in mind the pros and cons, but that's a whole nother live we'll talk about. Going into some of the things that you can do at home to kind of start the force-free training with your dog to kind of get them on board and stuff, because I know it can be challenging sometimes in general, even figure out what to do. So let me give you some tips to start with those common things that you may be experiencing with your dog at home. So as far as the jumping, when it comes to your dog, when guests come in. So you can start with teaching them sit. That's an easy command, and to stay for guests coming into the home. So start simple, like, 5 minutes out the day, ask your dog to sit and start giving them a reward and praising them for that. You want to get them in the habit of like doing things when you ask them, so you're going to use treats for that. So when guests come in, I tell folks all the time, give them a treat, tell them to ask the dog to sit, and then give them a reward. Those are all forms of force-feed dog training using treats. And if you don't have treats, ask the guest to tell the dog to sit, and then you can ask them to praise them by saying, yes, good boy, good girl. And that's another way to start the force-feed dog training as well. And we talked about the negative parts of it, turning your back. So if you don't have treats and stuff and your dog's jumping on guests, you can do that as well. Just standing still, or just turning your back and waiting for your dog to sit. That's taking away the reward. And that right there is something really simple you can have everyone to do across the board to kind of start the force-feed dog training if your dog's jumping. Scott, you use that with Archie too. Do you still have to do that with him or no?
No, he doesn't really jump anymore. Thankfully, he's pretty big. So once in a blue moon.
Yeah.
But
and
like,
I always tell folks, start early. It's only for a little bit. All right. And another one that a good technique to start the force-free dog training is on walks. Big calls, like a lot of calls I get with clients are dogs pulling on walks and things like that. One thing you can do when your dog is walking and they start to pull, just stop. Wait till there's some slack and on a leash, that when they stop pulling, and then you move forward again. They pull again, you stop. And that's the way where you're taking away the reward. The reward is actually moving forward and walking. Okay, when you stop, you're taking that away. And so if you stop every time your dog pulls and wait till they kind of stop pulling and move forward again, what you're teaching your dog is like, hey, when you stop pulling, you get to walk further a lot longer. And then what you'll realize is that your dog does stop pulling because they realize they get to walk a lot longer, a lot faster if they just don't. So that's another way until you can train them some loose leash walking and start to, doing the force-free way as well to get them on board. Have you ever tried that with Archie?
Yeah, we used to do that a little bit because when he would pull, we just stop because depending on what mood he's in, he can be a really big puller. Other times he just won't walk. So when he's a really big puller, we'll still do that, hold them, or we'll tell him, hey, give him time to sniff, and then it's time to walk. And then sometimes we'll hold that, especially when he's younger. We start to do that a little bit more as well. Just it does work, and it makes especially when they're thinking, makes them think, what should I do? What should I do? And then they realize, okay, if I give some slack, then we can all walk together, type of thing.
Exactly. They seem to figure it out really quickly, especially on those nice days when they want to get far. But those are just some few things you can start at home. But just remember, dogs learn by association. We learn by association, things we go through. We learn by praise and rewards. We're no different than our dogs. So if push comes to shove and you're like, okay, how do I get this trainer on board? Just think, use treats, build up that association, reward them for things, get them. I talk a lot about getting your dog in the habit of saying please and thank you for things. Just means sitting for things, sitting before they go out the door, sitting for basic obedience. And so that's the way you can get them kind of on board with things. But I know this may be a lot of information. Scott has a link that he's going to drop in the comments, and you guys can get like an overview, get the images of what I'm talking about. So you can save that post to that link that Scott's going to post, and then you can go back to it and you can start your dog on the force-free dog training method. Before we wrap this up, Scott, do you have anything to say to the folks to kind of piggyback off this force-free dog training method?
Yeah, just going back, I put the link in the comments on Facebook. If you're listening to this as a podcast, head over to our Instagram account at Down for Pause, and it'll be one of the pinned reels, a pinned post at the very top, so you can check it out there as well. But yeah, I think there's massive benefits to, force-free training, positive. It's just, you build a better relationship with your dog. And it's just, I know it's one thing that when I really found out about it, we really embraced it, and we just love the concept of it. So
yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Yep. And if you're unsure, you can always reach out to me. I'm always, open to answer any questions, getting a training plan together, figuring out what is the best method for your dog, and hopefully it is force free. But if you guys have questions, just reach out. Other than that, yeah, go ahead. Nope. Go ahead.
Yeah, you guys can reach out to Pam, downforpause.com, Instagram, Facebook, whatever is the easiest way for you. We're across all social platforms and everywhere. So check us out.
All right. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Okay, take care.
Bye.